skill feat choices and ancestry heritage choices are personal, and then spells are also kind of personal, but there are some things you can recommend. Items are even more in that category of like they're super personal, but like to a greater degree, because that goes down to like, oh, I really like this thing and I want to get it, or oh, we just happened upon this thing. And like getting direction on your items is like there are things to look for in craft, but you know it's like ain't really whatever. That's why I'm not going to go over weapons as much or armor, because it's like, well, you pick the armor you need and then you pick the weapon you want. Like, whoop. Hey, Pikachu-san. So it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, there are certain weapons that have interesting traits, and I could just open up the weapons page on Archives here and just look at just point out some weapons that have interesting traits that you can use, like the I think it's a Faux Shard I mentioned before, Reach Trip. The soccer tweet where the kids brought their... This is going to sound so weird out of context, and because I wrote 5 minutes down as my time, it might actually make it into the VOD I'm posting on YouTube. The context of me saying, well, them bouncing the ball off their murdered friend's coffin into the goal is both funny and endearing. I didn't put it in the cool video section on the Discord because I was like, the story says their friend was murdered, and that's not cool, even though they're doing a cool thing for their friend. So I was like, we'll just throw it on the general. Yeah, so we're going to jump into archetypes. So archetypes, like I said before, your build is your build, and what you want to do is what you want to do, and you might want to do something that's very, like, mechanically, a mechanical choice for your character, where you want them to get a mechanical advantage, and it's not so much min-maxy, because it's actually hard to min-max this version of Pathfinder. Just like it's hard to play it poorly, to do something poor. So if you want to do, I don't know, Golem Grafter from a weird adventure path, then yeah, Sterling Dynamo, kind of similar. If you want to do an artillerist, it's perfectly fine to do an artillerist. I'm going to throw out some ideas here, and I'm going to just point out interesting things with these ideas and which hybrid studies they work with, so on and so forth. So yeah, let's just hop into it. The Archer Archetype. Now, you're already trained in your simple and martial weapons for the bow group, so this little part's whatever. But if you're expert with a bow, you do get the crit specialization, which is, I believe it reads as something like you pin like an article of clothing or something hanging off the target, and I think it slows one or something like that. Actually, we can just look because the bow group has a link to it. The target is immobilized. Can spend an interact action to do a DC 10 athletics check to free the missile. Yeah, that's a really neat crit specialization, and you get access to that. That will also work on spell strikes. You can spell strike, get that crit, get the specialization in. So the point to picking the Archer here is there are some single action abilities that are interesting, and I think there's maybe something to be said for the multi-action abilities if you want them. But I'm looking at the assisting shot, where you can spend an action. With quick shot, you interfere with a foe in combat. Make a strike with a ranged weapon. If the strike hits, the next creature other than you to attack the same target before the start of your next turn gets a +1 circumstance bonus to the roll, or a +2 circumstance if your strike was a crit. Interestingly enough, the requirement is just a ranged weapon. So yeah, doesn't say bow. So yeah, because it's also part of sniping duo. Yeah, point blank shot. It basically removes the volley trait from longbows, and if you're using a ranged weapon that doesn't have the volley trait, you get a +2 circumstance bonus to damage rolls on attacks against the target within the weapon's first range increment. So you can spend your third action if you want. I mean, you're probably not going to do it to attack, but you can point blank shot as an option. Quick shot is basically quick draw for a bow, which is mixed depending on how you need that. You won't need advanced. Well, I shouldn't say you won't need advanced bow training. Advanced bow training is circumstantial. If you see an advanced bow you want, you can pick it up. If you want to do a crossbow, you can have access to crossbow terror. And then for the sort of multi-action feats down here, I don't know where that came from. You have double shot, so you can fire 2 shots with a -2 penalty instead of 0 and a -5. Parting shot, where you can step then shoot. And the foe's flat-footed against that attack. We're not gonna consider staggering fire for now. You have an aim ability where you can spend 2 actions to get a +2 on your roll. And you have triple shot, where you can double shot but 3 times, hence triple shot. And then you have 2 stances at the end, which probably aren't going to be using because you have Arcane Cascade. Although, I didn't even say this out of the gate. Sparkling, Starlit Span is the hybrid study to go for here. So you actually might use these because your Arcane Cascade doesn't affect your ranged attacks. So unless you're playing something that weaves into melee and out, Arcane Cascade isn't that useful for you. So actually, mobile shot stance or multi-shot stance might work for you. It's an interest. Mobile shot stance, because I wasn't thinking of using the stances because of Arcane Cascade, but I forgot that they don't work with your ranged weapons. So mobile shot stance could be interesting if you end up mixing it up and you don't want to swap to a melee weapon, because while you're in that stance, your ranged attacks don't provoke. And you can do an attack of opportunity, which you have access to at the 6th level for Magus. So that could be fine. Don't know about multi-shot stance, though, because you can spell strike. And that's sort of the thing is like with the double, triple shots. Like, you're probably always going to be able to spell strike with Starlit Span, so you probably don't need those as much. But yeah, you can integrate in the one action things, the single action things, and then you can probably take advantage of mobile shot stance. So yeah, for Starlit Span, Archer is actually an interesting option. So Bastion is for the Sparkling Targe. Bastion is like, everyone knows this one. I'm just including it pretty much because of that. So Bastion, when you get it, you get Reactive Shield at 2. Now you have Emergency Targe at 4, which is superior to Reactive Shield because it works with spells. Reactive Shield doesn't work with spells, but it's basically the same thing. You use your reaction to do the, raise your shield. So you get this 2 levels earlier, though, which is handy. But pretty much when you get Emergency Targe, you're never going to use it. So Bastion, the dedication, pretty much becomes the prerequisite thing you're doing to get the other abilities in this archetype. The big one to grab is at 10. We're just going to jump down to it. It is the Quick Shield Block feat. Quick Shield Block. You bring your shield into place with hardly a thought. At the start of each of your turns, you get an additional reaction that you can use only to shield block. So you can shield block twice. Or if you have attack of opportunity, that opens up your reaction a bit more. Sort of relaxes that action economy for a shield-based Magus. Is it necessary for Sparkling Targe? No. Like pretty much everything I've talked about, nothing is really necessary here. It's really helpful though. So other things here that could be wanted / needed. You have Destructive Block, where you can double your shield's hardness, but if you do, you double the damage it takes. But that could work for basically saving you. And then you have Shield Salvation, which is the opposite. Where if a shield will be destroyed from your shield blocker, it remains intact with 1 HP instead. But you have to repair it before you can use it again. Actually, I think you can combine those two together too, can't you? Because they don't have any sort of action or anything associated with them. Mirror Shield is also something worth considering too, because it synergizes with what the Sparkling Targe is. And because you're a Sparkling Targe, you get the benefits of having your shield circumstance bonus added to your saves, which means you can more readily reflect a spell with Mirror Shield. So yeah, Bastion all around, very, very potent archetype for Sparkling Targes. If you feel you need like more relaxed reaction economy, I guess in this case, for your shield. But yeah. Blessed One gives you Lay on Hands and a focus point, which is pretty okay. You can use Lay on Hands to heal yourself or others. It's an archetype that essentially you can pick up if you want to self-heal, that you can just self-heal. So Lay on Hands, you restore 6 hit points. It targets one of your allies. They also gain a +2 status bonus to AC for 1 round. If you use it against an undead, it does D6s. And as it heightens, you just get more flat HP restored. You also get, mercies and various support things for your laying of the hands on the things. So you can kind of do like a pseudo support thing, backup support thing as a magus. But I'm only mentioning it because it does give you another focus point, and you get a heal out of it if you feel you need a heal. All right, so I debated talking about Chrono Skimmer because it's rare, which means, you have to talk with your GM about picking the Chrono Skimmer up. And I wanted to include, a couple things from Dark Archives. I kind of wanted to include things from like all the books except for Book of the Dead, which doesn't help the mages that much. But yeah, Chrono Skimmer is essentially Tracer from Overwatch made into an archetype, and anyone can pick it up. But it is rare, so again, you have to discuss with the group and your GM specifically if it's something that you can viably pick. So the base ability you get, when you roll initiative, you have 3 options. You can either roll it normally, you can stabilize your time stream, or destabilize your time stream. So if you choose to stabilize your time stream, you don't roll your initiative. Instead, your initiative is 10 plus your initiative modifier. Whoops. I bumped some dice. So you essentially get to take 10 on initiative. If you choose to destabilize your time stream, you got to roll a DC 11 flat check. So you roll a D20. If you get an 11 or higher, you have a success. On a success, your initiative is 19 plus your initiative modifier. But if you fail, your initiative is 1 plus your initiative modifier. So if you're looking to have some luck go on with your initiative, you get this advantage. You also get the if you tie wait, was that part of it? Yeah, okay. If you're tied with an opponent, you go first, which is kind of handy. But yeah, you get this ability to tweak your initiative if you so desire. So turn back the clock is a reaction. You have to fail a skill check or saving throw once per day. After failing the test of skill, you hop back in your personal timeline to try it again. You roll the triggering check with a +1 circumstance bonus as you apply your experience from your last attempt. You must use the new result even if it's worse. Handy, not combat handy. Guide the timeline once per day. You know the result you want and subtly nudge the timeline to your intended destination. Choose an ally or foe. If you choose an ally, the next time within the next round that the ally makes an attack roll or skill check, they roll twice and take the highest result. It's a fortune effect. If you choose foe, the next time within the next round the foe makes an attack or skill check, they must roll twice and use the lower result. Unless they succeed with a will save against your Chrono Skimmer DC. It's a misfortune effect. Regardless of the choice, target becomes immune for 24 hours. This is a little single action ad where you can give an ally effectively true strike without the guaranteed striking concealed stuff. Or let's say you're in there and you're mixing it up. You get a spell strike off. You have that third action and you're like, oh, I might get attacked next turn. Ding that guy with Guide the Timeline and you can protect yourself with it. And then you have your gap. Or if you're on a gap turn, recharge spell strike, Guide the Timeline on a guy, move away, move up. Whatever tactical move you want to do. So reversing charge. This is where it's like that is literally a tracer ability. So you dive into the fray before rewinding yourself to safety. Stride up to your speed. If you end your movement within melee reach of at least one enemy, you can make a melee strike against that enemy. You then teleport back to the square from which you began your snapback charge. Oh, I think this was gonna be called snapback charge, and then they changed it to reversing charge. So your reversing charge. You can use reversing charge while burrowing, climbing, flying, or swimming instead of striding. Pretty normal addition for movement abilities. So yeah, this lets you spend 2 actions to hop up, strike, and then you get teleported back. Obviously not a spell strike, but still something interesting to move around with. And get like a hit and then move back. I mean, you could even do this as you do your reversing charge, recharge your spell strike type of thing. Or whatever you want on that third action. I'm like, what could you do here? Yeah, maybe one of your other actions here. So, superimpose time duplicates, 1 action. You call alternative versions of yourself, either from different timelines or perhaps yourself from a different point in your current timeline to aid you in combat. Until the start of your next turn, these alternate selves flicker in and out of your vicinity, providing flanking for you against all enemies within your reach. Flanking with your time duplicates is the same as flanking with an ally and is subject to the effects of all-around vision or to deny advantage class feature. So you can basically set your own flanks up, which gives you a +2. So with this, you can make your spell strikes a little easier. You can, I think you're just going to be setting up flanking for your allies as well. So, really handy little trick there. And since it's once per hour, you can pretty much do it every other encounter, depending on how many encounters you're getting into. Borrow time. Frequency is once per minute. The trigger is your turn begins. So it's a free action you can use at the beginning of your turn. You reach ahead and make use of the time that's yet to be. You become quickened and can use the extra action to step, stride, or strike. You gain this extra action immediately. You can use it this turn, but at the end of your turn, you're stunned 1. So your next turn, your actions are reduced by 1. So you get to basically pull an action from the future onto your character. This is kind of one of the things that made me eye the Chrono Skimmer for the Magus, because I've said it like multiple times that action economy, it's important to keep track of with this class. It's maybe the most action economy class in the game. And borrowed time can help you alleviate that a little bit, because you can use that to step, stride, or strike. And the big thing for me with the Magus is getting a step in there. So a free action where you're basically getting a stride. You can stride up, spell strike, stride back, double stride, spell strike, let the turn go, stride up, spell strike, recharge, spell strike. There's a plethora of options you can do that just alleviate that. Now, you are stunned 1, but you can use the other 2 actions on your next turn. Wait, hang on a sec. I'm getting that right? It comes senseless. You can't act while stunned. Stun usually has a value, which indicates how many total actions you lose, possibly over multiple turns from being stunned. Each time you regain actions, reduces by the number you're stunned. Okay, yeah. Anyways, you only have 2 actions your next turn, but if you're using that as a gap turn, like if you did a stride twice, spell strike, your next turn you only have 2 actions. Well, you can do that to like recharge your spell strike, stride, right? Or recharge your spell strike and strike. So there are things you can do on a 2 action gap turn. Hell, even if you do stride, spell strike, recharge your spell strike, next turn you're still adjacent. You still have 2 actions, spell strike. So there are a lot of ways you can play around with borrow time, and it really is like the thing that made me think, okay, let's try this out for the mages and see how it goes. So steal time, you once per hour, you reach into another creature's timeline and attempt to alter their flow of time. Select a creature within 30 feet. That creature attempts a Fortitude save against your Chrono Skimmer DC. That creature takes the effects of slow based on the result of the saving throw. Probably skip on this. You can just cast slow. If steal time was you slow the target and you get hasted, that would be more worth it. But just slowing them down, just prep and cast slow, and you could probably actually get more out of it if you're heightening it up because you can target 10 creatures by this point. Well, I'm assuming, no, you can't target 10 creatures by this point. That's level 12. But you're close enough to being able to target 10 creatures with slow anyways that I would probably pass on picking steal time and just prep slow in a couple turns. And you can just slow an entire group. All right, so combat premonition. By narrowing your sense of the future, you can improve that of your allies. When you roll initiative, instead of stabilizing or destabilizing your own timeline, you can grant your allies a flash of insight into their future. Choose 2 allies. Those allies roll their initiative roll twice and take the better result. It's a fortune effect. But you roll your initiative twice and use the worst result, misfortune effect. The 2 effects are tied together. If you avoid the misfortune effect for any reason, or if any of your allies would negate their fortune effect, your combat premonition does nothing. So this one, 50-50 on it. Funnily enough, because it's 50-50 ability. If you really want to give a couple characters in your team True Strike Initiative Edition, you can pick this up and use it. But otherwise, it's personal preference probably on that one. So, escape timeline once per day. Free action you can use when your turn begins. You step outside the flow of time momentarily, allowing you to avoid dangers. Your physical form stops existing momentarily, and you can't be targeted or affected until the start of your next turn. You simply don't exist for that moment in time. Your turn ends immediately, advancing 1 round for all time durations and effects, such as conditions and afflictions. You still attempt saving throws, flat checks, and any other checks at the end of your turn as normal, but you don't take any damage due to these checks, though you take any non-damaging effects as normal. At the start of your next turn, you re-enter the flow of time, reappear in the same space where you left last round. If the space isn't clear, you arrive in the nearest open space. So, escape timeline as a free action. Let's say you've gotten hit by a negative effect, and you're like, okay, this will end if I wait a turn. But it's something where, maybe you have some huge amount of frightened or something, or some other effect where it's like, oh, this is going to own me if I don't avoid it. Escape timeline, you go away for a round, come back, you've made your save, and you're safe. Or maybe you can use this to just blink, avoid that damage, blink back in. If you see something damaging that's going to happen, like Big Bad's just charging something up and drops it, there's, an enemy incarnate going on, you can use it to avoid stuff too. So it's a tactical feat that you basically don't exist for a round, which is something that could be incredibly handy. Based on, again, whatever tactical need you have for it. So, space-time shift, it's another free action. You can do it at the beginning of your turn. You can do it once per 10 minutes. You travel just a few moments into the future to immediately arrive at your destination. Your strides are augmented until the end of your turn, allowing you to instantly teleport to any point you could reach with your stride instead of traversing normally to the location. Your augmented strides have the teleport trait and don't trigger actions that could be triggered by move actions or upon leaving or entering a square. Your augment also affects burrow, climb speed, due to all your speeds. So, you get a free teleport step. Simple kind of freebie dimension door effects. Avoid those attacks of opportunity. Hop through things that are harmful. Just, it's neat. Reset the past free action once per day. So you manipulate time to recharge one of your temporal techniques by revising your past so you never used it in the first place. Select one of your Chrono Skimmer feats with a frequency of once per day, or more frequent, that you've already used. You can use that feat again, as if you hadn't used it already. So the capstone for this archetype at 14, excuse me, for the Magus at 16, is any of your once per days, you can reset it to use it one more time per day. So there are 3 of them, correct? So you can turn back the clock, guide the timeline, or escape timeline another time. Yeah, I could see getting it if you've gotten at least a couple of them. It's handy to get those abilities back. So Chrono Skimmer, while it's listed as rare, there are a lot of options to help improve your initiative, give you different approaches to initiative based on luck. You get teleporting movements. You can rewind your position. It's pretty cool. But yeah, it's rare. So keep that in mind. It's an interesting option for a Mages on the go. And it's neat. It's Dark Archive. Wanted to include it because of that. So this one, I am ripping wholesale from the Martial Magics guide that you can find floating around the internet. I didn't even think about doing Eldritch Archer until I read that guide, like whenever that guide first showed up. Because you don't think of it as something that a Magus would take. Because you have Starlit Span as an option. You can do ranged spell strikes. So the key ability on here is Eldritch Shot, which is effectively a spell strike, but for 3 actions. And you don't have to recharge it. So Spell Strike, you can do it for 2 actions, but it has the recharge. This is, you're just burning your entire turn to do effectively a Spell Strike. Now, there are 2 approaches to an Eldritch Archer Magus. One is straight up a dexterity-based Magus. You can do everything in this class if you have dex and a bow. You don't need Starlit Span for it. So if you're playing like a Laughing Shadow that is based more around dexterity, you could potentially jump over to Eldritch Archer and work in the Eldritch Shot as an option for your character. Or you could do Starlit Span and then option select whether you want to Spell Strike and spend the action for a recharge, or Eldritch Shot, where maybe on turn 1 you Eldritch Shot just because you're like, I might need to run away on turn 2. Or maybe your Spell Strike, recharge Spell Strike, next turn I'm going to Eldritch Shot. Like there's that choice you can make where if you're like, oh no, I might need my actions, my complete set of actions on a turn, I could Eldritch Shot here, use them, use more actions on the next turn. That's like run away than Spell Strike, right? So it's a little awkward, but it is something that you can think about if you're doing Starlit Span. I hope I'm explaining that okay. Regardless, you have the basic expert and master spellcasting feats, though the basic spellcasting feat is 8th level instead of 4th level here. And I will mention, it's confusing. It's a little confusing, this class, when it comes to how you get those spells. Because here, it says you gain a repertoire, and you're casting spontaneously. But I think it says, didn't it say in here? Wait, didn't it say in the core rulebook if you cast from prepared spell slots, you prepare this cantrip? Because I seem to remember it saying something about if you prepare spells like a wizard, you add this to your list. But if you don't, you gain spontaneous casting, and it scales off charisma. So there is, like, depending on how you can interpret how you get the casting in this class, because it doesn't actually, like, it's not based on a class, but it gives you spell casting. So this is very much talking about repertoires, which is charisma based. But it's going to be related to your casting ability. So maybe you could say these bonus spell slots, if you pick these feats in particular, give you just more arcane slots that you prepare into. That might be a GM talk. I would have it where if you're a wizard or a magus or whatever, and you have a spell book and you're coming in here, the spell casting, I would just lump it into that, because it gets too annoying to be like, oh, you need to have high charisma to get the saves on this going. Regardless though, if you don't care about saves because you're spell striking the spells, so it's more of your attack roll, that's more irrelevant. And you can also use these spell slots for utility anyways. And you're probably going to use them for utility. Actually giving it some thought, because they're going to be lower level. So yeah, just a little like side note that maybe you have to think about that. But yeah, anyways, you do get more spell slots if you so desire. But you also have access to these other feats that are pretty interesting. So Enchanting Arrow, probably pass on because you got Spell Strike. Magic Arrow could be neat because it lets you basically just make any ammunition you need as a free action once per round. They use the example of a climbing bolt, but with the way ammunition is, yeah, you can basically make any non-magical ammo you need. So you get effectively three common magical ammunition of 4th level or lower from the core rulebook or this book. So yeah, you can get basically special arrows that you can just form out of magic and shoot. Similarly, Precious Arrow lets you do that, but for cold iron, silver, and eventually adamantine. Those are fine. I want to talk about these three. So Seeker Arrow, for a single action, you have a shot that will seek, right? It goes boing, so it can just basically hit a target. You still got to roll to strike, but for one action, you basically can ignore concealment and cover and all that. Phase Arrow, again, one action. You concentrate. I'll just read it. You concentrate an immense amount of magic to create a piece of ammunition that phases through everything but your target. Make a bow strike against a foe who is observed or hidden to you but not undetected. The ammunition travels to your target in a straight line, passing through all non-magical barriers or walls in its way, though magical barriers stop the arrow. The shot ignores all cover, the concealed condition, the hidden condition, and circumstance bonuses to AC from shields. It has a +4 status bonus to hit creatures wearing any type of armor. The strike's damage can't be reduced with the shield block reaction using a non-magical shield. So Phase Arrow is another one. It's like Seeker Arrow. Seeker Arrow, I would probably retrain if I were going for Phase Arrow, but this basically lets you. I know there's a guy over there behind that wall, and just snipe them through the wall. You get wall hacks on an arrow shot, effectively. Once per day, though. Oh, I guess Seeker Arrow is just as many times per day. Yeah, this is once per day. And then you got Arrow of Death, where you can deal a crap ton of precision damage to a target. Yeah, and if they fail a fortitude save, they just die. But 3 actions to do that. That's the trade-off. Still, it's an interesting thing to add to your kit. And yeah, Master, the expert Master Casting, like I said before. Yeah, Impossible Volley. I'd probably pass on it, because that's basically like a weak fireball for you. And if you expansive Spell Strike, you can just Spell Strike a fireball into that group. So yeah, Eldritch Archer is an interesting choice for Dexterity Mages or Starlit Span Mages. I mean, I guess if you're using an Elven Curve Blade, you can use an Execrable Iron and then swap to a ranged weapon. Like, there are other little ways you can do it, but I think with, like, Laughing Shadow, because you have Dimensional Assault, you can jump in and out of combat. Oh, in and out of melee range. Spell Strike at all ranges effectively with Eldritch Shot. But yeah, if you're doing a if you're doing a thing with the Starlit Span, it becomes like, do I Eldritch Shot? Do I Spell Strike? You know, whatever you need. I think the other interesting thing, because you don't get the critical specialization for bows. So the other interesting thing is if you do a Dusk Walker, I think it is. Yeah. If you do a Duskwalker, you can pick up... Is it Vance Weapon Execution? Yeah, you can pick up Vance Weapon Execution. You do need to waste a feat on Vance Weapon Familiarity, but you can grab up Vance Weapon Execution to get the crit specialization for bows. So, might be an option if you want to also pin targets down with your magic arrows. So, had to completely rework your Minecraft mod pack. Anyways, just acknowledging chat there. So, Geomancer. Geomancer is an unconventional option for the mages. It's definitely something more for full casters, I think, because the mages, all of the abilities for the Geomancer require slots, because you the effects only happen from spells cast from spell slots. You have 4, technically 6, but those other 2 aren't going to help with this. But if you're sort of multi-classing and you maybe get more spell slots, this could be more useful. I'm throwing it out there because of Final Fantasy Tactics. Because the Geomancer in Final Fantasy Tactics, if anyone remembers, has a sword and board, and the Geomancy ability is just neat in that game. And this actually has kind of a feeling like that, but more Pathfinderized. So for me, this is like a personal, maybe I could do it in the future, but it's not particularly in that min-maxed category. So, the main ability you get, though, is Terrain Attunement. Whenever you're in one of these areas and you cast a spell that has this trait, you add these bonuses on. That does require you to be kind of like, hey, where are we right now? Oh, we're in a forest. Okay, if I cast a plant spell, then enemies have to attempt a reflex save on top of whatever the spell does. If they fail, they're clumsy 1 or clumsy 2 on a critical failure. It's free effects, though, on spells. And I've mentioned before, I always enjoy getting free things for free, and free things being good. So, out of the gate with the dedication, you basically get free stuff based on where you are and what you cast. And you can cast pretty much all of these reliably, except maybe the plant stuff. But that's not the real draw here. Well, it is the real draw, but The thing that makes this easier is Attunement Shift that you can pick up at 4. So for a free action, once every 10 minutes, you override your connection with the land around you, and you alter your terrain attunement to a terrain that matches the trait of the spell you cast. So you thereby gain your terrain attunement benefit when you cast further spells of the same descriptor instead of using the terrain you're actually in. They give an example. If you cast Tanglefoot, your terrain attunement switches to your choice of forest or swamp, and your terrain attunement applies when you cast another plant spell. Now, the attunement shift doesn't care about spell slots. This up here very specifically does. Correct? Wait, I thought this required a spell slot cast. Yeah, up here. When you expend a spell slot to cast a spell with the trait. Okay, so your attunement shift, though, because they're using Tanglefoot as an example, you can do Produce Flame to get like the desert benefit, which is the one I'm going to point out as a nifty little combo. So you do Produce Flame, maybe you Spell Strike it. Next turn, you cast Fireball on a group of enemies. You're attuned to Desert, which means your fire spells make enemies take a Fortitude save, and if they fail that Fortitude save, they're fatigued until they drink water, another potable liquid. So this is like the most basic mix-up you can do with the Geomancer, where you're tuned to the desert and you fatigue everything with a fireball. Like I said, this is more something for a full caster, but if you're a Magus, you can still utilize these things. You're just going to be utilizing them a little less because of your spell slots. But it is something that's kind of a neat way to play this class. And you can pretty much stop the class there if you want. Attunement Shift is where it's at, honestly. I mean, if you want to jump to another multi-class, you do have to pick up another feat, of course. And that's, a mixed... I don't want to say mixed bag, because everything in this class is actually pretty neat. So, yeah, you got Shared Attunement. So if you gain your benefit from your terrain attunement, you can grant it to one ally within 30 feet instead of yourself. So if you actually have like a caster buddy, you could terrain attunement, shift attunement to desert, pass that on to them, and suddenly your wizard now can fatigue that whole group with the fireball. Just throwing it out there, that's an interesting one. Depending on your mage's style, I would say Starlit Span could use rough terrain stance, but everyone else is going to be arcane cascading, so skip rough terrain stance. And you have Attuned Stride, which, when you have your terrain attunement, you ignore difficult terrain of the corresponding type, which is fine, but you can also jump. Draw from the land. Draw from the land might be what I would go with if I were trying to get a second feat, but that's at 10, so you got that to think about. So if you have your terrain attunement benefit and it's matching the terrain you're in, you can spend an action to gain temporary hit points equal to your level that last a round. You got Read the Land, so you can commune with nature. Shifting terrain, you basically Horalu an area, making it difficult terrain. Oh, you need rough terrain stance, so you're not doing that, so never mind. Terrain Shield is the other interesting one. Terrain Shield, basically, if a strike is going to damage you once per 10 minutes, and you gain your attunement benefit since the start of your most recent turn, and that attunement matches your terrain, the terrain blocks the attack for you, so like the terrain will shift up and block it in some way. That's kind of interesting. But yeah, a defensive ability is always welcome for the mages, even though it's all the way at 14. And then Quickened Attunement, if the next action, well, it's meta magic for one, so you're not going to use it with the mages as much because you got a Spell Strike, and Spell Strike doesn't use meta magic. But if you're casting a spell normally, you can attunement shift and reduce the action of the spell by 1. I would say if you're dipping into this to dip to something else later for more slots, you could just grab Shared Attunement. It'll help any other caster out. And yeah, if you don't care about jumping to another class, you can just go Geomancer and then Attunement Shift and go. It's like I said, it's unconventional, but it is interesting. Also, keep in mind, if you want the higher feats, you do have to keep training up nature. So for the dedication, you just need trained in nature. And then for these two, you can just pick them up. But if you want rough terrain stance, attuned stride, draw from the land, you need expert in nature. Then read the land and shifting terrain and terrain shield need to be master. And if you want that quickened attunement, you need to be legendary in nature. So you do need to focus on nature if you want the higher feats. But yeah, like I said, it's unconventional but interesting for a mages to pick up Geomancer. And it very much fits with the FFT design of a Geomancer. So, the Mauler. This is for an exorable iron. It's the two-hander archetype. So, as you would expect, the two-hander hybrid study is what we're going to associate it with. So, you don't get any benefit out of the training part of this. But if you're expert with a weapon that you wield in two hands, you get the crit specialization on it, which is a nice little bonus. And this is an interesting archetype in that everything is pretty much two or more actions, which, you're using Spell Strike. That's two actions too. So you can use these as alternatives to doing a Spell Strike. So you got Knockdown and Power Attack. Clear the Way lets you basically knock enemies away in a group, and then you can move. Knockdown is probably what I'd go with, because you can do like I said, you're next to iron. You're probably doing a reach weapon, and you're probably enlarged, so you're probably doing kind of a, well, at least for me, in my head, this is an extra iron, is doing more of a tanky, battlefield control-y thing, and Knockdown gives you battlefield control without burning spell slots, of course. So maybe you don't care about Power Attack. Knockdown, though, can be an alternative to action ability to a Spell Strike, where you just knock someone down. And they're prone now. That helps your allies. That provokes attacks of opportunity if they try to stand up. Oh, excuse me. It's a really handy ability to use when you're playing that tank fantasy up. Now, Clear the Way, I can maybe see some use for it. Like I said, if you're enlarged with a reach weapon, you basically can shove up to 5 creatures. Well, it says adjacent to you, so never mind. So yeah, you can basically get things off of you to run away, or get things off of you so you can go forward even more. There is improved Knockdown as an option where you can stride as part of it. Wait, no. When you use Knockdown, instead of making a single strike followed by a trip, you can attempt a single strike. If you do and the strike hits, instead of rolling a check for the trip, you automatically apply crit success effect on a trip. So yeah, if you're only 2 on weapon, you can use, so you don't move and then do it. It says you dash to your foe. Oh, it says you dash your foe to the, okay, never mind. Misreading the first sentence. Anyways, yeah, this lets you basically do a knockdown without needing to roll the trip part of the effect. So that can be pretty good. And then we have Brutal Finish. It's a single action ability. You make a strike with a 2-hand weapon. After the strike, your turn ends. But the strike gets 1 extra damage die, 2 damage die if you're at least 18th level. That could be a little kooky thing you could do. Not necessarily after a spell strike, but maybe on your gap turn, you can recharge that spell strike, move up, Brutal Finish. So you have some options in there. So for the last 3 feats here, they're all 3 actions. So they're not, spell striked. But Hammer Quake and Avalanche Strike are definitely things to think about picking up. So Hammer Quake, you smash the ground with your weapon, knocking nearby creatures to the ground. Choose a square within your reach. Again, enlarged, reach weapon, including your own space. If there's a foe in the chosen square, I guess you could have like a small thing in your space. Anyways, strike that foe with the required weapon. Then attempt a trip attempt for every foe in the chosen square, plus each square adjacent to that square, ignoring trip's requirement that you have a free hand. This counts as 3 attacks towards your multiple attack penalty. Words about trip attack or multiple attack penalty. So this is basically you hammer an area and just get knockdowns for adjacent things. Which is pretty neat. And Avalanche Strike, you attack all nearby adversaries, make a melee strike with a required weapon against each enemy within your melee reach. Melee reach. Each attack counts towards your multiple attack penalty, but doesn't increase penalty until after you've made all your attacks. So again, in my mind, I see lots of inexorable Iron Mages as being large-sized or larger. You at 16 are gonna have the heightened and large, so that's like what 15 feet worth of reach. And you do basically this crazy flourish of a whirlwind, blast everything with your weapon in that range. Yeah, I think this is a really neat addition to like the Branga Bunga style inexorable Iron Magus. I said it. I finally said Branga Bunga in this class. It definitely adds some good unga to it. Like, yeah, it's 16th level before you can get that fantasy move off, but still, it's a neat thing to have as a Magus with that particular setup. Yeah, so Medic. I'm only putting Medic in here because everyone who is trained in medicine and has battle medicine can option the Medic to make battle medicine or treat wounds even better. So it's like, and you get a bunch of feats in here, and holistic care and treat condition are skill feats, so you can actually grab them in the skill feat category instead of blowing your class feats on them. So yeah, you can grab up some of the feats from this, you can grab it up actually at 2nd level if you want, and then you basically take care of the feats for this and can jump to another dedication if you like. So yeah, Medic, medicine is really, really good, and even a Magus can take advantage of it. Like I said before when I was talking about skills and multiclassing to the Cleric, I believe I mentioned this too, Wisdom is tied to your perception checks, which is effectively your basic form of rolling initiative. So you're probably going to still boost Wisdom, even though it's not a main stat for the Magus. And that means you're boosting up medicine, which means you're not going to be terrible at it. You're not going to be like the medicine guy, but you can make your Magus more supportive and add a level of versatility to the class through the Medic dedication. And you can, like, eventually you do get Resuscitate, so you can just raise that without needing the spell, which is kind of funny. So yeah, Medic, quick note on that it is an option. Now, Mindsmith is really cool. It has some options for every hybrid study, except Starlit Span. I didn't actually write notes for Mindsmith, so I think I actually have to talk about it. Because, like, Medic, I just put in the... Oh, yeah, and Assurance Medicine, by the way. You can also pick that up and just battle medicine, like, freely with Assurance Medicine. Just throwing that little tidbit in there, too. Anyways, Mindsmith. So, new to Dark Archive, this archetype lets basically anyone pick it up, and you get to make a mind weapon. So, your mind weapon, there are 4 base forms of it. A one-hand weapon that deals a D4 that has Agile and Finesse. A one-hand weapon that deals D6 and has Finesse. A one-hand weapon that's just a D8. Or a two-hand weapon that's a D10 with Reach. Now, when you make your mind weapon, you can have it deal bludgeoning damage and be a club, piercing damage and be a spear, or slashing damage and be a sword. So you can combine together any one of its forms with any one of its types, and that's your mind weapon. So if you want, like, that stupidly long sword, that's a D10 with Reach, that's two-handed, there you go. Also, an inexorable iron. Same thing with making it a spear or a club. If you're playing something that's dex-based, you have 2 options for Finesse Weapons. Weird option. If you're twisting tree and you're one-handing your staff, you can Mind Weapon out an Agile Finesse Mind Weapon, so you can dual wield with it. And since it's your Mind Weapon, you can just drop it and not care about what happens to it because it's in your mind. So, yeah, it adds some interesting options, both flavor-wise and mechanically, to the Mage's class. So it also can't be broken because it's an extension of your mind. No hardness, can't be damaged. You project it as an interact action. Obviously, you can drop it as a free action and then reproject it in your hand. So you can't be disarmed effectively. You can always just reform it. And also, the last thing about this is when you create your mind weapon, you also use a Mindsmith Keepsake. It's an object of light bulk, like a bracelet or figurine, that you wear or keep on your person, and you can inscribe this with weapon runes. So you effectively can apply the fundamental and property runes to your keepsake, and they apply to your Mindsmith weapon. So your Mindsmith weapon can keep pace properly with the regulation weapons in the game. And it just works the same way as inscribing those runes on other regular weapons. They just go on your keepsake. And by the way, each day you can choose your weapon type. So if you want to go in with the 2-hand reach weapon, you can do that. Or if you want to go back to a one-hander or switch to an agile finesse little mind knife, you can do all of that. So Malleable Movement's a free action. It's a skill feat, by the way. So you can keep that in mind, that you can grab this same level you get the dedication as the skill feat there. And it also counts as one of your archetype feats for the purposes of the selecting of another archetype. So you shift the shape of your weapon to help you leap farther and faster. You shift your weapon in a long flexible pole, climbing hook, or similar aid, adding an extra 5 feet to the distance you're able to leap. As normal, you can't increase the distance of your leap beyond your speed. So this just basically, it gives you kind of a pseudo powerful leap with your mind weapon. So Ghost Blade, this allows you to add Ghost Touch to your mind weapon for a minute. Circumstantially handy to have. Just the tool. For an action, you temporarily change your weapon shape to assist you in the field. You morph your weapon into a single simple tool, like a shovel or crowbar, to help with a mundane task. You can't replicate entire toolkits with this ability. You can use this action again to change it back to a weapon. Again, circumstantially useful to have your weapon change into a tool. So here's where the real class begins, because the mind weapon is fine. Oh, and by the way, you do need proficiency in martial weapons to use your mind weapon. Or whatever the shape is, you actually need the proficiency to use that shape. So I think you actually need proficiency in simple weapons, right? Or does it say it's a martial? It's a martial melee weapon. So you need proficiency in martial weapons to use your mind weapon. Just putting that out there, too. It's something to keep in mind. Which, we're mages, we do that anyways. So why am I talking about it? I just wanted to mention for people who maybe pick up Mindsmith who aren't mages. So Mental Forge. This allows you to put 2 traits on your mind weapon. Grapple, modular, non-lethal, shove, or trip. They can't be changed until you spend a week retraining your fighting style to swap one property for another on the list. I would say, for the most part here, grapple and trip are the way to go with this. Even if you're not doing the 2-hander. Because being able to grapple and trip is a very helpful thing for the mages to have. And with this, if you go for the athletics feat and go assurance athletics, you can turn your third action into a grapple or trip through your weapon and do it more easily, like if you're doing sword and boarding, like with Sparkling Targe, or if you're 2-handing with an actual iron, or if you need that free... Well, if you have the free hand, probably don't need Mental Forge, because, Laughing Shadow can just do grapples and trips. For certain mages, the Mental Forge ability becomes really handy to have. So, I talked about with Mauler, the idea of the enlarged reach weapon Magus. Well, you do the enlarged reach weapon thing with Mental Forge. You have a grapple trip weapon with whatever style weapon you want. It's a pretty neat addition. It's like the Inventor weapon, but you aren't restricted to getting those traits at 8th level. You can get them at 4th level. And I always like weird traits on weapons, so I do really like Mental Forge where it's applicable. And like I said, if you're Assurance Athletics, for those that don't know, grapple, shove, disarm, trip all have the attack trait. So if you do them as your third action after attacking twice or spell striking, they'll take a -10. But if you have the Assurance skill with Athletics, that's where you take 10 and then add your proficiency bonus on. Not your stats, not any bonuses, but also not any penalties. So if you have like expert in athletics, that's a +4, and you're level, say, 4, you're doing an 18 on that check, right? So that allows you to just say, okay, my third action, I'm by this squishy wizard or something where I'm thinking they don't have a good fortitude save. All right, 18 against their fortitude. Oh, look, I'm grappling this nerd now. That type of thing. It's a handy trick to kind of throw into that third action. If you feel like you'll get something, you'll get the advantage of doing that out of that third action. It's handier for like a fighter to know that, but a magus knowing that too is also still good, especially a strength magus who's maybe focusing on athletics. So yeah, and if you have a weapon that has that trait, you can just do that with the weapon. Anyways, moving along. Mind Shards. 2 actions. With a swing and a thought, you detonate your mind weapon in a burst of psychic shards that shred the mind. You concentrate and unleash a 15-foot cone that deals 3d6 mental damage to all creatures in the area. There's a basic will save against a higher of your class DC or spell DC. After the attack, your mind weapon automatically reforms, and you can't use this ability again for 1 minute. Mind Shards damage increases by 1d6 at 7th level and every 2 levels thereafter. So, neat little damage ability here. It's not a spell, so it's not a spell strike, but it's something for 2 actions you can blow to deal damage in a cone if you feel you need that. So, at 8th level, we have Malleable Mental Forge. You open your mind to further weapon customization. During your daily preparations, you can choose any 2 traits from Mind Forge to place in your weapon for 24 hours until your next daily preparations, replacing the traits you choose with the Mental Forge feat. Each day, you can swap the choices with any other options on the list. So Mind Forge, Malleable Mind Forge just let you customize that weapon every single day. Mind Projectiles. So you've learned to stretch at 8th. You've learned to stretch your mind's influence further, releasing projectiles with a swing of your mind weapon. You make ranged mind weapon strikes. These are ranged strikes with a maximum range of 30 feet that deal 1d6 damage of the type of your mind weapon. Your ranged mind weapon strike gains all the benefits of your mind weapon's runes as long as they are still applied to a ranged weapon. For example, if you had a +1 striking spell storing runes, the item would get the +1, but it would deal the extra damage from the striking rune, but you wouldn't be able to unleash the spell from the spell storing rune, as those only work with melee weapons. So yeah, mind projectiles, you probably don't need it. You're a magus, you can cast spells, but these basically give you 30-foot ranged attack if you feel you need that. Runic Mindsmithing. You focus your mind on thought forms of fundamental magic forces, shaping them into a property rune that you mentally etch in your mind weapon. During your daily preparations, choose 1 rune from the following list: Corrosive, Disrupting, Flaming, Frost, Shock, Thundering. You enhance your weapon with the chosen rune until your next daily preparation. This rune counts towards the max limit of runes as normal. So you have the Runic Impression. Yeah, that's what it's called, I think. You have that Runic Impression conflict spell, which basically can do this as a conflict spell. It's still nice to have it as an option because you don't have to pay for it. So if you leave, like, this basically is a cost reduction method. If you choose to pick it up, you can add extra damage to your mind weapon. At 12th level, you have metallic envisionment, so your mind weapon counts as either cold iron or silver, which is, nice for exploiting weaknesses. And then 16th level, you can now do anarchic, axiomatic, holy, or unholy runes. In addition, once per day, you can spend 10 minutes of uninterrupted focus to swap your daily prepped rune from runic mindsmithing to another rune on the list. When the swap's made, the second rune remains in your weapon until your next daily preparations. So, yeah, you can add on the alignment things for runic mindsmithing. For me, for a Magus, this archetype, you get the Mindsmith dedication. If you want Malleable Movement, it's up to you. Ghostblade and Mental Forge, Malleable Mental Forge if you feel you need it. But yeah, those three sound like really handy feats to pick up for a Mindsmith. And it lets you spell strike directly from your brain to the enemy, which I think is pretty cool. You could probably further this concept by mixing the Psychic in after picking up the 2 feats from this class, this archetype, which makes you even more Branga Bunga. Like, that's true Branga Bunga. Like, your brain is literally the power source of your abilities at that point. Even more so technically than it is as a thinking creature. Coffee's almost gone. Okay, Scroll Trickster. I'm going to throw this in here because of the Striker Scroll feat you can pick up at 4th level. And this adds versatility to your character because it lets you do your trick magic item with a +2 and basically opens up the other traditions through its scroll cache ability because you just get free scrolls, free temporary scrolls per day. And yeah, I would say useful for striker scroll because it gives you that free scroll. You can put whatever attack spell you want in there, and you just get a free attack spell per day then. But it's handy to have the ability to just use a lot of scrolls. Thaumaturge gets something like this, and I thought it was the neatest thing the Thaumaturge had for its feat lines, which is basically giving it spell slots from all the traditions. This kind of adds that to the mages too. So if you feel you need like heals, you can grab heals. If you feel you need whatever the primal list has on it that the arcane list doesn't. Same thing with occult. Yeah, you can use the Scroll Trickster to get that. Sentinel is here because Sentinel. This is for strength mages. Gives you heavy armor. It's like the 2 things to say here. And it's the thing, like, I think is the most basic thing that you could think of as a magus is to get heavy armor, to get another +1 on your defense, and to boost the bulwark trait at 10th level to +4 instead of +3. And it applies to all reflex saves in that case too. So yeah, Sentinel gives you heavy armor. You can cast in any armor in this game. So you're just harder to hurt. Not necessarily tankier, you are more defensive. So Sentinel, that's another little note thing. They can just grab it up for that heavy armor if you feel you want heavy armor. I guess Champion, you could do this too and probably work on getting lay on hands. But yeah, Sentinel, another recommended archetype. So, Time Mage. Time Mage is another unconventional one, kind of like Geomancer. So first thing to note in Time Mage is a good chunk of these are meta magic. So what could have been Into the Future, Quicken Casting, Time Splitting Spell, and Echoing Spell. So 5 of the feats in here are meta magic. You can use them if you feel you want them, but you cannot use them with a spell strike. So I'm probably not going to talk about them really. But when you grab up the Time Mage Dedication, you get a focus spell. Handy for getting more conflict spells off. You get the Delay Consequence Domain spell, which lets you delay damage from affecting a target. Could be a lifesaver. It's a tactical use spell. But not over the top amazing. And you can cast Time Sense as an innate cantrip at will, which is a little more interesting for mages because you can Time Sense Arcane Cascade on turn 1. And the Time Sense's little +1 it gives is circumstantial, but you could probably finagle some RP reasons in to get it. So out of the gate, the Time Mage Dedication gives you some little buffs. Another focus point, the ability to avoid some damage, possibly save someone's life with it, because you can delay that damage, give them a heal, the damage affects them type of thing, and you get Time Sense for free. Now, you do have Time Sense in your spell list already, so if you don't feel that as an advantage, that's a fair point too. Anyways, and it also points out that the Time Mage archetype is in your same tradition. So the non-meta magic feats here. Chrono Cognizance basically lets you sense time effects, which is a skill feat. And you need Master and Perception, so you're probably never getting it. So could probably skip on it. Chronomancer's secrets give you either stasis or path of least resistance, and we'll read them real quick. So stasis, it is incapacitation, so it doesn't work on higher level things. But it does work on lower level targets to stun them. It puts them like a time bubble. Yeah, it has some tactical applications as a focus spell. You also get a focus point off this feat. Or you can get Path of Least Resistance, which is a little more valuable to me because, it's you trace several possible routes, quickly resetting the timeline until you find the safest route. Choose 3 spaces you could reach with 2 stride actions. Each must be at least 20 feet from the other 2. You stride twice to one of the spaces and determined randomly by the GM from among the paths you choose. If some of the paths contain hidden danger, such as a trap that would trigger by walking on the trap's area or affected area, the GM doesn't consider this path when randomly determining which one you take. But if all options have a hidden danger, the GM randomly chooses between all 3 points. This movement doesn't trigger reactions. Basically, if you think you might get hit for moving through a space, or you might be going through a trap, you can Path of Least Resistance. It's also 2 strides for 1 action. Putting that out there too. It is randomized. That is a factor. But if you're going Path of Least Resistance to like a squishy in the back or something, it's 1 action to get there, which means double stride spell strike. With some RNG in there. Future spell learning is a feat that might be worth picking up, but everything in here you have already, except for Behold the Weave, which is, again, incapacitation effect, so more powerful things are resistant to it. So you behold the many timelines that weave around a creature, and in doing so you make one more likely to occur. The target attempts a will save. On success, it can make neither heads or tail of the target's timeline, and the target is unaffected. If the will save is a success, the target must commit a single action that will take it at some point during its next turn. And they give like stride towards Valeros, cast shield, strike a Miri with my jaws. The action is now locked in, and the creature must attempt it, even if the situation has changed. If the creature stated that it would strike a Miri with its jaws, it must try to do so. If the creature is entirely unable to fulfill the action it committed to, for instance, if it only had 1 action left and a Miri was out of the range of its jaws strike, it loses the last action of its turn as it reels in the temporal paradox. The creature can choose to lock in a 2 or 3 action activity if it prefers to do so, but if it does, it loses all associated actions if it can't perform the activity this turn. If the situation changes oddly, perhaps the creature's forcibly teleported away and has no idea which direction toward Valeros any longer, the GM determines what happens. If they fail, it's as that, but the creature must commit at least 2 of its actions for its next turn. Gives the action, I will stride toward Valeros and strike with my claws. All the actions are similarly locked in and can't be changed, but the creature can take them in any order. The critical failure is as the failure, but it commits all of its actions next turn, locked in this way. Heightened to 7th level, this spell, instead of affecting a single target, affects all enemies in a 30-foot emanation. Kind of where I like it, actually. So, Behold the Weave, it's almost the reason I would consider taking Time Mage, and why I'm mentioning it here. Because, yes, it's an incapacitation ability, which means it's not going to affect higher level creatures as much, and you can never get the critical failure on higher level creatures, more powerful creatures. But I really like the idea of forcing creatures to take actions because it can force them to not do other things. And if you're able to break that action and create that temporal paradox, you basically take their turn away from them. So you could have it be, you cast Behold the Weave, and the creature's like, yeah, I'm going to move up to the wizard and strike them. Well, that wizard then has the option to try and screw with that timeline and create a temporal paradox, and the creature could be like, I can't use my brain, and, they're just stuck there. Now, you do add other spells to your spell list: Cast on Time, Haste, Loose Time Arrows, Quicken Time, Slow, and Stagnate Time. All of those are nice. We talked about Haste and Loose Time Arrow in the spell session. But yeah, all of these are on the arcane list, but you do get them. Cast in the Time is a damaging spell that can sicken. Haste and Loose Time's Arrow quickens creatures. Quicken Time and Stagnate Time create little pockets where a creature going into that pocket on the battlefield gets hasted or slowed if they pass through those areas. And then slow is, slow. So future spell learning for Behold the Weave, I think, is why I am bringing this archetype very specifically in. It's like I said, unorthodox Magus option, but kind of neat to be able to create this spell effect that you break time, kind of. And it also, when you heighten it up to 7th level, it's a big area of effect that can happen. The other meta magic abilities, they're fine. I mean, what could have been is kind of funny. It does require summoning, which I don't recommend as a Magus because you can't sustain it at all. But it basically, the meta magic change on it is the summoned creature is you from a different timeline. So instead of generating a random troll with Summon Giant, you summon a troll version of you. So presumably it has all of your abilities, but it's also a troll, as an example. So into the future, it's meta magic again. Can't spell strike it. Basically lets you cast the spell, and then the spell happens a little later. Which is kind of neat in its own right. But yeah, you get access to the oracles, read Disaster. So you gain the effect of Augury, except you learn only about dangers ahead. Any result of Wheel is instead nothing. And results of Wheel and Woe are instead Woe. For your Legendary Religion, it only takes a minute to cast it. So you get some future predicting that's a little weaker than the true Augury spell. There is Quicken casting, but again, I mean, I guess if you want, you can spell strike, Quicken cast another spell. That's an option. You get the Investigators plot the future action, which is kind of neat. And the other ability that is not meta magic that you can take advantage of here is Pure of Moments. So for 3 actions, once per hour, you have 5 rounds happen for you in your 1 round. Now, this isn't you take 5 rounds worth of actions. That's busted. That's what the old time stop was, right? For this, 5 rounds of time pass for you. So you are basically frozen for 1 round. 5 rounds happen of time. So anything that has a duration ticks 5 rounds past. This type of ability, on the surface, it's like, you're like, so? Well, that means if you're hit with something really bad, and I mentioned this before with Chrono Skimmer, where they can blink themselves out for a round, this blinks you out for 5 rounds of that. So any beneficial effects, negative effects, afflictions, conditions, and persistent damage, you still got to roll the saves. You still got to roll your flat checks. You still got to do the damage, and anything else associated with them still happens. But because you're out of time, they all clear out. So if you're hit with something really bad that will, stupefy or whatever, you can't stun obviously because it's 3 actions. But if you're stupefied really hard, or you're frightened, and it has a longer duration than a couple rounds, you can Peer of Moments, pull yourself out of the timeline, pop back in, you're better. So it's a cleanse. Now it does take away positive effects, but I mean, getting rid of negative effects basically for free can be really powerful. Although you do take all of the damage all at once. So you could do this not thinking of what's going on, and then suddenly you pull yourself out of time, pop back in, and just explode in a poison blast or something. So got to keep that in mind. But still, it's a powerful effect to me that you can pick up at later level. Now, the time splitting spell and echoing spell, I'm probably just going to skip talking about. Time splitting spell lets you cast 2 spells, and you get to pick one or the other, but both are expended. Echoing spell is you cast the spell, and then you can cast the spell the second time without expending a spell slot. That could be useful, but again, that's like 20th level too. By then, you got your Supreme Spell Strike or Whirlwind Spell Strike. So Time Mage, kind of weird, but still kind of interesting as an archetype. And the last archetype I'm going to bring up is the Viking, and this is for Sparkling Targe. This is the alternative to the Bastion. So when you get the Viking, you get Trained in Sailing Lore. And when moving through water using your land speed, you ignore the difficult terrain resulting from shallow water. And when you roll athletics to swim, you always get a critical success when you roll a success. So handy little things, but nothing like crazy, right? Now, you don't get Reactive Shield for free, which is fine, because you can get Emergency Targe. But you still get access to Quick Shield Block with this. So it's an interesting alternative for the Sparkling Targe if you don't feel like you want to pick up Bastion, but you still want Quick Shield Block, that you can pick those up. Now, you can also grab up Second Shield and Shielded Stride. So second Shield as a free action, if your shield breaks, you can interact to draw your shield, or an unintended shield in your reach. Or if there's an object that could serve as an improvised shield, you can interact to draw that too. So you may have only one shield on you and it gets blown off your arm, but then you can pick up a board or a chair or whatever, and now you have a shield back. You still have to raise it as a shield, but yeah, it's neat that you have that backup, because you also do have the shield spell still. But yeah, if you shield block and it breaks your shield, you can pull out a second shield, or a chunk of. I mean, hell, I could even see improvising and saying, "Well, I'm gonna pick up my broken shield and use it as a shield." Still, that's an improvised shield. And then you have Shielded Stride. When your shield's up, your enemy's blows can't touch you. When you have your shield raised, you can stride up to half your movement speed without triggering reactions, and it applies to flying or swimming. Which is. I mean, there aren't as many attack of opportunities in Pathfinder 2e, but still provides you protection if you're moving with your shield up. The Viking Weapon Familiarity and Specialist. I don't think I would pick these as a Sparkling Targe, because while it's intriguing to get the critical specialization with battle axes / hatchets, and then longsword, short swords, you have to blow another feat to get it. which makes it not worth it because you already have training with all of these weapons and shield block. So yeah, it's not worth it to me to get the crit specializations in there. If this was prerequisites Viking weapon familiarity or trained in all of the weapons, then it would be probably worth it to pick up. But yeah, it's just not worth it. Yeah, it is a mage's guide, but if you are playing another class that does eventually get expert in weapons, you can add these in if you jump to Viking. I don't know, like a weird alchemist Viking would get, expert proficiency with these weapons at 13 or whatever. But yeah, that's something for other classes. And of course, that's a Knights of Last Wall thing, which we're going to ignore for the time being. So that is the archetypes. Not all of them, obviously. Just some I find interesting, and some, just some things where it's stuff to consider. Neat little tricks, oddities like Geomancer and Time Mage. So that's this sections. I'm gonna pour some tea, and we'll start into some items, I think, for the next part.